Welcome to Unbiased and On the Fence. It's the power of 8 at 8. How are you guys doing this evening? We have special guest. Well, of course, Eileen's with us, but we have special guest, Cynthia Sue Larson. How are you doing, Cynthia?
Great. It's such a pleasure to be on the show with you guys.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful to have you here. I'm really glad we can make this happen. And I will read your bio for those who might not know. I'm sure a lot of the viewers already know who you are, but Cynthia Sue Larson is a best-selling author of several books, including Quantum Jumps, Reality Shifts, and Higher Energy Money. She is an intuitive life coach who helps people find love, meaning, and prosperity by accessing worlds of possibility. Cynthia has a degree in physics from UC Berkeley, an MBA degree, a Doctor of Divinity, and a black belt in, help me out there, Kuksul
One.
Nice. Cynthia hosts Living the Quantum Dream on the Dream Vision 7 radio network and has been featured in numerous shows, including Gaia TV, the History Channel, Coast to Coast AM, One World with Deepak Chopra, and the BBC. Cynthia is a popular speaker and keynote speaker who reminds us to ask in every situation, how good can it get? Very good. And we do have all of your links down below, or all of your main ones anyway, to your site and your books and your YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, your blog, and your podcast. So no problem with people getting a hold of you, Cynthia. You're connected.
Awesome.
I first came in contact with Cynthia many decades ago with Reality Shifters. And what's really interesting is that we didn't even have a Mandela effect back then. We didn't have anything named Mandela effect. But my favorite book of Cynthia's is called Quantum Jumps, An Extraordinary Science of Happiness and Prosperity. So I highly recommend you guys get this book. Almost everybody here who comes here every week, Cynthia, has already read The Power of 8 at 8 with Lynne McTaggart. And I just wanted to read page 7, which to me sums up this whole Mandela effect, reality shifting, quantum physics, spirituality. Cynthia says, we're entering a weird, wonderful world of possibilities in which we'll discover that just because we think something is certain, it doesn't mean it will stay that way, or that others will experience it the way that we do. And then she goes on to the legal systems being transformed, historians, psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists, all having to recognize alternate histories. I'm like, woo, that was a big, Mandela effect paragraph for me, as being a natural part of existence. And that'll affect medical professionals, and it'll encourage people to adopt states of mind that facilitate quantum jumps in healing. So she says, our views of unbiased observers and impartial judges will be forever changed as we appreciate how information can travel anywhere instantaneously and how everyone and everything is interconnected. So that's page 7. And that to me just is like the holy grail of the Mandela effect. So with that, Cynthia, I guess the first question would be, how did you discover this kind of Mandela effect reaction in matter and consciousness 20 years ago, before we actually had something to hang it on, a name?
Right. That's a great question. Well, I started having experiences with what I didn't have a name for it at the time. This is in the 1990s. So, and actually, the internet is not what we know it as right now either. So even just trying to run a search to see what's out there was not as simple a thing as it has become. So back then in the 90s, but I did the best I could. Originally, I was on the ARPANET, which was a network between universities, like the University of California at Berkeley, where I got my physics degree, and it would be connected to other universities around the world. And so what I was doing was just checking to see, has anyone else noticed this? Because I was literally noticing things appearing, disappearing, transforming, transporting. And the more I paid attention to it, the more it was happening. So it was not going away. I wasn't doing drugs. It wasn't anything like what a trip or that kind of thing. So it was obvious to me that there's something, such a real phenomenon occurring. But when I talked to people, I also noticed that there was kind of a like, oh, whoa, I don't want to talk about that reaction in the 1990s. And the more I thought about it, I realized I'd actually witnessed this experience all my life. But there was no more ignoring it possible for me starting in the 1990s. So that was when it really became unforgettable, unavoidable. And to me, it seemed more important than anything else in the news. And it seemed more important than all of the scientific discoveries I'd heard about, because in just one beautiful, magnificent package, we have been gifted with what looks like a solution to pretty much any almost seemingly insolvable problems that we might be facing. And so that's pretty extraordinary there. I'm noticing that the past is not set in stone, that events can change, that our thoughts literally affect the physical world in ways that we can observe. We may not be able to prove it to skeptics. There's some reasons for that. But nevertheless, we can witness it for ourselves, and we can each be scientific in our own pursuit of growing understanding, appreciation, and awareness of this entire phenomenon. So that's pretty cool.
I think it's really neat that, it's funny that things haven't really changed much, I guess. We have the Mandela effect, and you got a lot more people that are aware of this sort of thing happening. But on the other hand, I come across the same thing that you're talking about, where you talk to these people and they don't even want to hear about it. Or they don't want to have the discussion. I don't know. What do you think that is? Do you think they're just scared of it, or you think they don't believe it, or what's your feelings with that?
That's a good question too. It's hard to say that it's always one thing, because with different people, it kind of depends on where they're at. I sometimes notice people do acknowledge that they have had that lost sock in the laundry experience. Mm-hmm. They have noticed their keys. They'll set their keys down, and then their keys are not where they know they put them. So they'll admit to that. They'll say like, okay, yeah, that's happened, but maybe that's as far as they want to go with it. And then when they see that you're going somewhere, like, let's take a look a little bit more deeply at what's happening. That's often where I get like, whoa, not ready for that.
So it's like just a fear reaction. Like, you're saying that matter pops in and out of existence. That's too scary. I don't want to go there. I want to stay in the world where matter is firm, stationary, unchangeable, because that's not scary.
Right. And also, we're social animals. So I think in lots of people's cases, they don't want to go too far from what they believe collective consciousness to be supporting. They don't want to be the weirdo that's just gone outside of what we know to be true. They don't want to be the one whack job that's like, okay, I believe in crazy
maybe that's what's changed then, because Shane started out as a Mandela Effect channel. I started out as a Mandela Effect channel, and we've moved so far away from just Mandela effects by responding to everybody in our community who are, healers and artists and thinkers, and they study religions, and they're just great people pushing the envelope. So we had to move on beyond the Mandela effect too.
I'm so grateful for you guys, because that's what we need. We need people like you that are helping to share these ideas, and you obviously don't look like nut jobs. You don't look crazy. So because I think that's the biggest, when you talk about fear, I think that's the biggest fear people have. That's that if they're pushing back, they're like, I don't want to be crazy. Let's not go there.
That's why you were so brave 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
As a physicist, a member of the scientific community, going, hey guys, this matter is not steady over here. It's popping in and out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that was a really unpopular view. I mean, you really laid it all on the line when you have an education like that. You spent all these years in school. I think a lot of people see it, but they don't want to risk it all. It's not something they
Yes.
don't want to do. So I think a lot of people see it, but they're just like, hey, I just rather not go there. I'm this or
Right.
that. If you think about it, if you're a professor or something,
You lose your job.
you know,
You start
yeah.
saying, Nelson Mandela is not alive. You think he's alive, but I saw his funeral in 1987.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
a teaching job if you said that back in like 1995, which is when I was shocked when Nelson Mandela turned up in England with the Spice Girls. I'm like, why is he standing there talking with the Spice Girls when he died in 1987? And I just chalked it up to a really bad memory. I just went, okay, it's one of those moments where you just do not trust your memory.
Yeah. A lot of
Right.
people probably do that, right, Cynthia?
Oh,
They
for
just,
sure. Yes.
yeah.
And sometimes people remember things both ways, and then they feel like, okay, my memory is just a little sketchy. I can't be certain of what I remember.
Do you
But
want
I
to tell
found
us
out
as a physicist why that's happening? Because Shane and I have noticed, and the people in our community, we're a group here, that will remember it one way. And then if we give it enough time, then we'll remember it both ways. And we're like, darn it, now I remember it both ways. So what's happening there? Why are we suddenly going from one memory to both, the new and the old?
Yeah, well, it's kind of cool when it happens. So I find it quite practical and useful, actually, especially if you're working on healing or changing something for the positive. So it's very good. But from a physics standpoint, it's true that we can't know anything for certain. There's definitely, you've heard about the quantum uncertainty. And what I believe is really happening with these Mandela effects, reality shifts, is that we're witnessing quantum phenomena occurring on this very large, warm, wet, noisy biological environment inside of our warm, wet, noisy, bodies and in nature, and on a very huge cosmic scale. It's not limited. It's not like Las Vegas where what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So some people, I think a lot of physics community were hoping that what happens in the quantum realm stays in the quantum realm. And so they could relegate the bizarre stuff to the realm of the very, very small. Now what we're talking about, yeah.
That's really what we're seeing, though, isn't it? They recognize that this is happening. I've seen animations for decades now where they show, like, they'll use the pool table experiment or, analogy where a ball will just disappear and another ball will reappear. And this is all at the micro scale of the quantum. We're talking about superposition and, this, I guess, idea that things at the particle level, subatomic particle level, can just pop in and out of existence or move to a different dimension and all this stuff. But to think of that in a macro level is just too far out of the box, I guess, huh?
Exactly. And right now, we don't even have a quantum theory that's going to support where we're going with this. That's okay, because it'll come along. It has to, thanks to the advent of quantum computing. So again, we're on the cutting edge. No problem. On the bright side, more and more of us are acknowledging, for sure, we're witnessing these flip-flopping realities. We're witnessing alternate histories. We know this is happening, for sure. And that's good, because we're the ones that are on the HMS Beagle, like Charles Darwin. We're the ones that are observing nature as it exists. And then what we can do, once we observe these things, is point out, okay, what's the science to support this? We can take a look at, and I would suggest take a look at quantum physics. That's where we're going to get the best kinds of answers, even though that's not complete yet, because we still don't even have an agreement within quantum physics as to, what is the interpretation of quantum mechanics, these beautiful equations that absolutely allow us to build quantum nuclear reactors, quantum weaponry, now quantum computers. But okay, we can do all that amazing stuff, but with quantum computers, finally, we still need to start knowing what we're doing.
I don't think we've heard that they don't know how to program these quantum computers. Oh. They have a theory on what they should be able to do, where ones are zeros and zeros are ones, so all states exist at once. And that's it. Nobody knows how to use them yet or program them. Is that true?
They use them. They don't know how they work, really, though, right? It's like they know the science behind making it work, but how would you explain that?
Yeah.
Okay, now we get into something really cool, which is quantum logic. And it's the idea of, for a long time, we had classical computers. We had bits and bytes, which are like zeros and ones on and off. And that made sense because it fits truth tables. When you look at Boolean logic and you've got your true, false truth tables, you've got and statements, or statements. So it's one or the other. everything makes sense, and it's all black and white, and it's so beautiful. Now we move into the quantum logic, and quantum logic is the big superset. So if you're familiar with set theory, the very tiny class. So what I'm saying is classical physics and classical logic are a very easy to understand smaller subset of the bigger quantum logic, which is much more comprehensive, and quantum mechanics as well. So quantum physics can actually explain classical physics, but classical physics turns out to be a very special, simplified case of quantum physics. I think this is really interesting because it gives us the ability to recognize that we already know how to think in a quantum logic way. In quantum logic, your initial conditions absolutely make a difference. And that's just like when we make decisions and we humans start where you start from, and your unique point of view matters. The relationships between everything that you are thinking about makes a difference. So what we know as humans, when we make decisions, when we remember things, that's what quantum computing is going to need to be able to do. And that is how it's going to be working. When we humans are thinking about lots of possibilities and we're considering them as not quite fixated yet, we haven't chosen what we're going to decide on, but all those things are in play. That's very much like a quantum computer also. So
looking at all the possibilities, but you haven't picked one yet.
Yeah. So actually quantum logic is something we are very much familiar with. We just haven't learned that yet. And this whole quantum invasion that's about to hit every single branch of science is going to be huge. It already is shaking things up in the fields of biology and astronomy and chemistry. So it's going to just continue just like everywhere. And it's causing so much chaos in the sense that all of this black-white logic that used to be the case is going to be thrown out, and people are going to start recognizing, no, you need to look at simultaneity of, superposition of states. Like we have to imagine that everything is possible all at once, and that your initial starting conditions matter, that you can only, it's kind of like what you know is equal to what you don't know in any given system. And so the way of thinking is completely different than the assumptions that form the foundation of all of Western science.
Wow.
That's why it's such a huge upheaval that's about to happen.
Then can we talk about the fear? Because people are all over YouTube going, CERN blew up our planet, so we have the Mandela effect. D-Wave is contacting demons through multiple dimensions. They're going straight, some, not all, not us, but some places are jumping straight into the fear factor. And I'm not hearing that from your descriptions, that this is, or is that a possibility that we don't know what we're playing with yet? Is there?
Oh, we don't know what we're playing with, of course, but but I'm an optimist in a sense, because I've actually I care so deeply, so passionately about what's going on, and I'm aware, like all of the top people like Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk and Bill Gates, you'll hear them talking about the dangers of artificial intelligence. I know what they're talking about. However, to be honest with you, from a philosophical point of view, I follow the work of Leibniz, Wilhelm Gottfried Leibniz. He's one of the two co-creators of calculus. We use the notation that he came up with. Leibniz also came up with the basis for all of our ideas of elegance when we look at scientific theories. So he was behind a lot of that, and he's a philosopher. The other one that I look to is Nicholas Rescher, who wrote a book called Axiogenesis, which is really all about optimizing. And the reason that these ideas are so important to physics and to reality and to not panicking when we start noticing like, whoa, this looks scary, it's because when you consider all these levels of consciousness that orchestrate and create this beautiful universe, we are definitely part of something bigger than ourselves, and we're part of something that you might call ultimately good. So I'm not pushing any kind of spirituality on you, but I do like to invite you to ask, how good can it get? And to turn your imagination in that direction, because of course you can always go how bad it can get, but let's not go there. Let's keep asking how good it can get. And these philosophers definitely go that route too. And they point out that the universe clearly is already proving to us that it's of that nature of how good it can get, of optimization. making things better, because you can see that the odds against everything existing the way it is right now are astronomical. It's just highly unlikely that any of this would have happened randomly. So that's kind of cool.
Let me ask you what you thought when you first heard about the Mandela effect, and you're like, finally, all these people are finally figuring out what I've been talking about for 15 years by that point, probably, right? So what was like your first impression when you first, how did you come across the Mandela effect? Even though you knew about it, but you didn't know of it as that, it had been coined, that phrase had been coined and applied to what you'd already been talking about.
Yeah, I heard about it and I thought that's good. I didn't have my hopes set really high that it would be snowballing and building the way it has. And this has been great. I've been really pleased to see that it's in it for the long haul. People are consistently gaining interest in it, talking to more people. This is what I really was hoping for, and it's happening.
Well, for me, it was like before the Mandela effect and after the Mandela effect, because you have to go back to the drawing board and completely throw out so many things you thought were a certain way. You know what I mean? So it's like a total paradigm shift for anybody who really experiences it. It really is more of an experience thing to see reality change in a seemingly impossible way. And you're like, what the heck's going on here? So yeah, so many things. I had to clear off the chalkboard, start all over again. And I can't imagine ever going back to, the solid, unchangeable past or reality that I used to know.
That's right.
And you're the better off for it, because your mind has just expanded into so many ways. I've known you almost 2 years now, and I've changed in the 2 years. We see ourselves like willing to jump into so many new possibilities because of the Mandela effect. Mm-hmm. It had that it shook us up. It grabbed us by the collar and shook us awake.
Yeah. Well, you had a Kundalini awakening when you first came across this, right, Cynthia?
Yeah, I had that happened in 1994. So I was in my 30s, and it was before I started my website. So it took me like 5 years to integrate everything before I got bold and courageous enough to say, okay, let's bring this out, because this is definitely happening. It's for real. I'm not imagining it. But I think the Kundalini really helped in a sense, because if I didn't go through that experience, I wouldn't have seen just how wacky things can be. When when I'm running that much energy, there's no avoiding it. It's like I can't even pretend it's not happening. It's like okay, this is serious.
I know early on when I saw the response from people when you try to talk to people and you just figure like this would be this fun conversation, people would be like, wow, and not go back to fiddling with their phone like it's no big deal and stuff. That kind of freaked me out. But I don't know, after I talked to maybe a dozen or so people and didn't get the response that you would expect to get from people, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to play along with everybody and act like I don't see these things happening, and wondering how many people are just playing along. And, because it's like you either see it or you don't, or I don't know.
That's exactly it. See, now I've been playing along for years, and that, when the Kundalini came along, it's like, I can't play along anymore. This is like big. And so it was necessary for me to kind of get me out of my, let's just pretend like everything's normal, which I'd been doing for so long. But now,
you said something earlier that was really interesting. You said some people who go, whoa, don't go there, this is scaring me. You said that's for a very good reason. Why is it that some can wake up to it now and go, this is cool, and other people are like, I'm not going there? Why is it important for us not to push it on them? What's going on?
Thanks for saying that. Yeah, exactly. Because when you look at what's going on with the Mandela effect and reality shifts, a lot of this is driven from the subconscious, actually. And so this is why I just keep saying over and over, how good can it get? How good can it get? Just make it a mantra. Let it sink in deeply. Take it when you go to sleep at night. Think that. When you wake up, think that. Let that be your guide. Because what you need to do is like gently retrain the whole subconscious. Because what we are taught, maybe not on purpose, but most of our parents and most of our schooling has to do with, you got to pay attention to what's wrong. You got to look for what's shady. You got to be suspicious. You got to be cynical and critical. And so we get taught to look for what's wrong, to sort of expect what next. Like, okay, 2 things happen. We know there's going to be a third. And I'm just saying, like, whoa. You really don't want to be doing that if you're running Kundalini energy and if you're experiencing Mandela effects, because the fear will bring things right to you, and you'll start getting a lot of that. that's why, until people kind of clear out the fear, I think that's a super important thing to do. And that's why I wouldn't push this experience on people, because if they're feeling afraid, then they're not ready for it. That's what I'm saying. Because you will see what you are, most deeply needing to experience. And some people need to experience their fears. But to me, fear is not really real. But you need to get to that level of spiritual growth to know that. And that takes a while. So I wanted
to thank you for several people that have told me, they were like, oh, wow, she helped me out early on before anybody was talking about this. So I want to thank you personally from those few people that were talking to me about it. And they're like, oh, they were glad that you were coming on and talking about this whole thing. Because I get that a lot too, but I just, sort of showed up on the scene here on the tail end of things. And here you've been around talking about this. And even like how to use it in a beneficial way. Like that we actually can use our intention to control what we think of as the Mandela effect, just on a personal level or individual level. Do you want to get into the quantum jumping part of this?
Sure. Yeah, it's
awesome.
this is all pretty related stuff. So, and we're talking about the subconscious. So, obviously, when you need to have a quantum jump or a reality shift, and it's a life or death situation. I've heard from lots of people that have had their lives saved where they know for sure they'd be dead right now. And, it's in that moment. And that's why, for sure, it's the subconscious that's helping to power that up. It's like, I need to survive this. And that's when they'll experience things that, to me, sound like quantum tunneling, quantum teleportation. They'll find themselves completely, in a different spot on the other side of an oncoming vehicle. Like the two vehicles are coming head on in a tunnel, and now they're on either, opposite sides of each other. And there's no way that could happen.
Yeah, I've heard this too, yeah.
Yeah.
And so question to the physicist, does that mean that accident happened on one level or timeline or dimension, and they hopped over to the point where it didn't happen? Or does that mean it didn't happen on that level at all? How do you justify the time, whether we're jumping timelines or whether we're staying put and changing the matter around us, but we're not going anywhere? Do you know what I mean?
Right. I don't have a complete answer on that, because I've actually heard from people that have seen themselves. And those are the cases that make it. Otherwise, if I hadn't heard from the people who've literally witnessed themselves, they'll see their own car coming in a different configuration. And that's like that. It just like really rattles them. Like, that was me coming back because I forgot something, but I'm here. How could that be? And so they're obviously. So I think that maybe a little bit of everything is happening. I don't know. I mean,
that's a great question, though, because that's something I always get stuck on whenever it comes to trying to figure out what's going on. Because from the quantum field, you can imagine that as soon as you stopped paying attention to that timeline, I think that's helpful to think of it in timelines. But, in a sense, like once you left it, did it just become a field of possibility, probability? I mean, did it go back into superposition mode because now your focus is in this situation? And then we've got some of the residue, like with the Rodin's Thinker statue, where you've got 18 students posing next to it with their fist to their forehead, but he's changed. So it's like, if this was a different timeline I jumped into, then they would have always been mimicking him in this timeline. But now we've got a photo with 18 children that apparently can't mimic a statue that's right there in front of them, and it's like, that makes it seem like, we have one reality that gets manipulated or something,
Well, as far as like going back to that vehicle, two vehicles coming head on, and then they're on the other sides, that could simply be a case of what we call quantum tunneling, quantum teleportation. It's happening on the macroscopic scale, and you would expect to see that happen occasionally, and then you don't need timelines to explain it. But having said that, the timeline thing is a word we use to try to get our mind around what the heck is happening. And
because we think linearly.
Yeah, because we tend to get stuck otherwise. But then we often then believe, like, okay, there's only two possible realities, like the Rodin here and the Rodin here, and which one is it? And there could be a whole bunch more. There could be a lot more. I don't know. And I don't know what to say about that. I think, obviously, when we see reality residue like that, it's evidence to those of us who experience these things. Like, okay, that's pretty convincing to us. Like, something is going on. There's no other way to explain it. how could that many people, 18 students, get this wrong? That's crazy.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah. But
Yeah.
And like Shane and I were talking, if you've got residue, that's from the other timeline. That means the other timeline is still here because the residue's here. So then maybe here is always here, and we just tune in to different heres with our minds, like a radio receiver. Like I might tune into country, you might tune into classical, Shane might tune into rock, but we're all in the same room with our little radio receivers. And the silly thing about that is to put everybody in the same room seeing different realities, because then I'll go, Cynthia, that's not true. You're not right. It's different. And Shane, you have no idea what you're saying. It's like this. And we'd all see it differently in the same place, which would lead to a lot of discussion, if not arguments, right?
We do get a lot of arguments, and that's something I pointed out. I co-authored a paper on that subject, that you can have what you think is an exactly common experience with your friend, and then find out they think you said something that you did not say, and you can get in a big argument about that. And so it's really important to notice that both could be true. You remember it correctly, you did not say that, and they remember it correctly that you did say that. And there's no need to argue. It's like, okay, that just happened. This happens
a lot. Well, I actually heard you talking about it before, where you're like, there could be like siblings that are discussing this childhood memory, and they're like arguing over the details, but they both could be completely right in their memory, and they think the other one's just misremembering. But it's been happening. Yeah.
And in my book, Quantum Jumps, I talk about this experiment, which was done at a university with professors who asked students to write down what they remembered, where they were, what was happening at the time of the Challenger space shuttle explosion. And so they did that. They put it in a time capsule for a year or two. The professors hand all their papers back to them, their own handwriting, and the students are looking at it. But before they get them back, they write down the answers again, like where were you, who were you with, how did you find out, what were you doing? And then they open up the original and they look at them side by side. And several students said, okay, this is my handwriting, but that's not what happened. And it's like super freaky.
That would kind of indicate that we are constantly quantum jumping, and we just don't know it. We don't even know our past, because we think we know our past, but it's not what we really experienced. Then the question would be, where does our past come from? Does it come from our future? So every time we make a decision, we create a new past, because now we're on a different future?
That's possible. Well, it gets into the idea of identity and consciousness. And, those two things are very interrelated. And then also spirituality to some degree, like that idea of how good can it get? Because your idea of good and where you're steering yourself. Are you going to be steering yourself based on who's doing this to us? And like, what's this subterfuge? And what's this terrible scheme that's going on? Or are you asking, how good can it get? And clearly we're part of a benevolent universe, maybe with a very benevolent deity or the universe or whatever you want to call that. And so for those who are out, we're seeing evidence to support that. And but you're right. I mean, this raises amazing questions about identity itself, because I believe, and what I've witnessed with like the flip-flopping, that I can go back and forth between a couple of different realities, such as when we had a family dog and he was getting cataracts in his eyes. They were clouding over. He was an old dog. But I know that when that happens, you don't need to accept that. And I just felt like, no, from my subconscious, no, you're not going to go blind. You're going to be fine. And then other members of my family would come to me one at a time and say, bad news about the dog. And I said, oh, okay, sometimes it looks like he's getting cataracts. We're not going to accept that. And with my family, they're like, oh, that's what we're doing. Okay. And so and then it would switch back. And then it would happen again, like, oh, bad news about the dog. It's like, okay, I know it looks like that. We're not going to accept that. And that's what I mean. You can do this with anything.
What happened to the dog? Tell us.
He was fine. His eyes cleared up. So, I would observe it kind of going back and forth, and I would see it and I'd think, oh no, that's not happening. And then it would clear up. And then the other members of the household saw that too. And now he was fine for years afterwards. So it was a
spontaneous remission. I love it when something like Snopes or some debunking place goes, Your thoughts and feelings do not heal your body, although there is a thing such as spontaneous remission. And then they don't describe what is spontaneous remission. That's your thoughts and your feelings in your body.
Yeah, aside from that, it doesn't happen.
Aside from that, it doesn't exist.
Right. Well, rare still happens, right? Well, one thing that I want to pick your brain about here, Cynthia, is the fact that so many people can experience different Mandela effects. Like I knew of someone who like saw them all, but when it came to the JFK, when he's like, well, no, it's always had 6 people in the car, and I'm like, it's just strange. So, when we notice something change, do you feel like because it's sort of this idea that if you observe a shift, you can look around and notice a bunch of things. Do you think it's an individual thing? Like if one little, like the dog, for instance, do you feel like things change, like in the sort of concept of jumping into this other timeline, and where the dog's eyes were cloudy, your keys were also lost, but you jump back, your keys were found, now the dog's eyes are cloudy again, that type of thing. Are they connected in a way like that, do you see? Or is everything individual, or how do you see that?
Well, here's where I see entanglements coming in, because, and also something called quantum Zeno effect and EPR steering. So 3 ideas that tie together and kind of help present a story of what's going on here for me. And so what I notice first is the entanglement. So as each person notices the dog, and and I have my reaction like, oh no, we're not going to go there. I don't want a blind dog. That's not okay. That's not happening. Mm-hmm. And then one by one, the other family members notice that the 2 realities, and then we're all choosing together, like, okay, the dog vision is going to stay good. And so it becomes a team effort, and that's entanglement, where we're kind of checking in with each other, sharing what we're doing together. And this is the power of, the stuff that Lynne McTaggart talks about too, I believe, with bonds and all that. Oh my gosh. So we really witness it there, the power of this entanglement that can happen. What I mean by quantum Zeno effect, okay, this is where it's interesting, where one person notices all these Mandela effects, but he can't see a difference in the JFK car. For that person, it was always 6 people in the car. Okay, what I see here is very similar to the Mandela effect for people in South Africa. If you ask them, did you ever notice that Nelson Mandela died and then he was alive again and it's weird? They're going to say, what are you talking about? Because they were there. And so quantum Zeno effect, it's kind of the watched pot never boils. And literally in quantum physics, you can do this. You can lock a system into a particular state by going kind of OCD on it and checking. The more you check, you can hold it in whatever state it's in. Like you keep checking. Are you there? Yep, you're there. You're there. You're there. You're there. There. And so it's like a quantum.
So it's the observer effect then. It's like the.
Okay, there's a slight difference. Quantum Zeno effect, you're locking a system into a state. You can actually hold it in place, literally, because usually a quantum system, as long as you're observing it, it's in a given state. When you look away, it can move. There was a really great show on this, if you watch Doctor Who, and it was the one with the angels. And
that was so scary. Remember?
It was terrifying. I know.
Tell them what happened.
Yeah. Okay. So these angels are statues, and if you look at them, everything's fine because they're perfectly still. They're like these aliens they look like statues of angels. But if you look away or if you blink, they'll move a lot closer to you. That's the scary part. And so Doctor Who is giving advice like, don't blink, don't look away. You got to keep your eyes open. And so the quantum Zeno effect is a lot like that. You can hold a system in place as long as you're looking. So for the person who's looking at the JFK 6-seater, that was always that way. He probably paid a lot of attention to it. And for him,
what it was? He had a calendar hanging on his wall growing up of it. He's like, the only thing I can think of is I had this calendar hanging on the wall all growing up, and I remember it always having 6 people in the car. And I've noticed that a lot with like closeness. So like if you talk to a heart surgeon, for instance, he'll say, no, the heart's always been right here in the center, up high, and between the lungs and all this. But, like we know a nurse, like overprotected. She's like, no, I remember when the heart was over there. And, you had to put the little doohickeys on the people to check their heart or whatever. And they go around the left, and she remembers both ways. So she just wasn't observing it constantly for her own consciousness then, right?
Yeah, so that's the quantum Zeno effect. So it's like check. The more you check it, the more it tends to stay in one place. So, and then these Mandela effects, these reality shifts, they can be very personal. They're not necessarily, you don't expect that just because someone saw some of them, they're going to see all of them. Maybe, maybe not, it's not necessary.
Now, I had an interesting situation where I went backwards in my Mandela effect. Remember the tires? I did a little video on it because I was one by one, I was popping these tires. After the hurricane, it brings up a lot of nails and detritus on the road. So you tend to get a lot more punctures. And I did a quantum jump on purpose into the best possible future for myself and my family. I didn't leave them out because I don't want to move ahead in a way that would be detrimental to somebody, obviously, in my family. And then I lost some of my new tires. Some of my old Goodyear tires popped back on my car, and I drove to the tire place. It's the only place I go for oil changes, brakes, everything. And I got the manager out, and I said, Paul, you put 4 tires on this car for me, Bridgestone. He went, yeah, I did. And I go, well, where'd I get these Goodyears from? In the back. And he went out there and he was scratching his head and he was like, what? He ran to the computer and my Bridgestone purchases were gone, disappeared. It showed I only bought 2, even though he and I knew I bought 4 and I put 4 on because I did the front tires in May and I did the back tires in August. And by September, after the hurricane, I had my old tires on the back again. And he's like, I'm going to give you a free tire because I don't know where they went, and you buy one and I'll buy one. And I'm like, okay, deal. But I didn't want to push the Mandela effect on him because you could see it was really hurting his brain to think of how my old tires, it was like a magic trick. So somehow I jumped forward in time with a request for a good quantum jump in my future and my family's future. And it put me back to where I never had those flat tires in July and August. Obviously, because my old tires were on there perfectly whole. So those flats had never occurred. Have you done that? Have you moved forward and jumped backwards into an old apartment, or you painted your room blue and then one day you open it up and it's yellow again and you're like, no, it was yellow. I painted it blue 2 years ago. That kind of.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Well, with respect to healing, I've done it like going back to before an injury occurred as if it never happened. So I've done that one a lot. So I'll have a cut, or my daughter once had a blood blister and that went away. And I've talked to a friend on the phone who'd broken her leg, and then it was unbroken. So, and I think it's really useful for healing to just be able to make that jump backward, especially if something's happened that you don't want it to have happened. And then another one with a tire on my car. Oh my gosh. I was just doing this meditation as I was driving, like how good can it get, really in that zone. And then I can feel like, bam, I could hear the noise, flat tire. I know which one it is because the car is now pulling. I know it's the right front. I heard it. I felt it.
Yep.
I'm hearing a crunching in the gravel that's different between the 2 front tires. So I just pull over and I think, wow, here I am thinking how good it can get. And that happened. Oh, well, okay. So I get out of the car. It's parked. I walk around. I look at the tire and it's perfectly fine. And I think, I'm in a hurry to go where I'm going. I don't have time for this. I go back and I sit down in the driver's seat. But wait, I can't go anywhere because I know I have a flat tire. It's so confusing, even for me. So I get out of the car, go back around. I kick the tire. Now I know why people kick tires. I'm like, I was like, feels fine, looks fine. I don't know what to do. So I'll just drive really slowly. If it sounds like it did, then pull right back over. Okay. So I'm going like 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour. It seems okay. Weird. So I get where I'm going, get out, look at the tire, go to the meeting, come back, go home, look at the tire. I'm looking at the tire constantly. And then I talk to my husband, who used to be a mechanic, and I say, could you please, I don't tell him what happened. I just say, could you check the tires on the inflation? It seems like something's a little off. And I don't say what. He comes back in. He said, well, everything's fine. I mean, 3 tires were low. One of them was perfect. And I'm like,
the
no.
one that had the flat.
The right front tire was perfect. Yeah.
No.
How good can it get, huh?
So awesome. that blew my mind. Like I didn't have to change the tire. It's kind of like God changed my tire or something. Like, okay.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
good.
So these changes are happening in between the spaces of time. It's those moments in between that PM Atwater talks about in future memory versus deja vu. And it's that time in between moments of awareness where those changes happen. Like your tire didn't heal itself over a period of 3 or 4 minutes. It just, boom, in some moment, time stopped and the old tire was gone and the new tire was in instantaneously, right?
Right.
How do we get into those moments? How do we get into those creative moments in between moments?
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned PMH Atwater, because she was the first one to really use the term reality shifts. I didn't know she'd used it because then I was trying to think, it was before the internet. You have to remember what the 90s were like. I mean, it was like the dark ages. So this is like a long time ago. But then I found out she had this book called Future Memory with a whole chapter on reality shifts. It was so cool. And so it's such a great idea.
And you've got her in your quantum jumps as well.
Yes.
I got into touch with her, not personally because of my near-death experience, and she did the best book on it called Near-Death Experience, The Rest of the Story. Just a beautiful book. So that's how I found PMH Atwater. And then you talked about Future Memory, so I went out and bought her book and read Future Memory because it's in here.
That's outstanding. Anyone interested in this topic, that's definitely the book to get because it's the first one. But Michael Talbot also kind of touched on it a little bit, but not quite as deeply as PMH Atwater. So those two, or when I was looking for who else is even talking about this, those are the only two at the time.
But wasn't Michael Talbot more of a scientific academician or whatever they say, and she was writing for the public? Her dad was a policeman, so she went after everything like an investigator, like a detective.
Exactly.
So she's
Michael Talbot, but he was an experiencer too. He experienced a lot of stuff that was just pretty out there, and I liked that. I liked his honesty. He wrote The Holographic Universe, and that book is awesome. Really, is that
good. Like mid '80s or mid '90s?
Yeah, I think '80s. Yeah, because he's not with us anymore.
I know. I read that book a long, long time ago.
So going back to what you're saying, these things do happen in an instant. Like they happen in an instant, but just because something's happened doesn't mean it's all over. You can always remember these things can flip-flop. So just because it looks like it's already settled, don't panic. Just keep asking how good it can get. Recognize that you don't have to accept what it looks like. You can recognize I want something better. How good can it get? You gotta. I'm really inviting people to feel that energy and to bring a fullness of more meaning into our lives, more connectedness, that we can really help improve things for everyone in a big way.
How do we quantum jump into how good can it get? How do you, is there a technique? Do you have a meditation technique, or it's individual for everybody?
Yeah, well, there are techniques, and my books, I've got exercises and so forth. Reality Shifts was the first book I wrote, and that one, I've got lots of meditations and, it's ideas of exercises and things you can do just so that you recognize that if you're working with your belief structure, you can change these things. Just because you believed something in the past doesn't mean you have to keep believing it. It's to help people make that transition. Because what helps the most that I find is to line yourself up. We tend to think I want this, but when you think, who is I? Who are you? Very seldom do we really take a look at that and notice, are you really on board with it totally within yourself, whatever it is you think you want? Usually people's heads that's what they think they want, but maybe it's what someone told them or what they saw on TV or what they believe they're supposed to want. Their heart is not in it and their subconscious totally not in it. And if that's the case, then you need to line this up because you're all kind of wonky. It's kind of like you need to work on some lining up of your own desires and your own genuine vision of what you'd like to get, feelings of love for what you really care about and feel motivated by, and then what you absolutely need. And when you've got that lined up, you're going to get what you need every time, and there's no problem with it. So then it's kind of like a tune-up on your car. Otherwise, I could just give advice like, okay, you're going to go do this, but for different people at different levels of experience with running their energy, with lining themselves up, you're going to get different results. So, everybody's different. But I do having said all that, sure, there are techniques you can use. There are general principles you can follow, and it's always about the basics. So it's not as complicated as it seems We're all quantum jumping all the time. Reality shifting is the way nature works. That's how I see it. So when I look at biology and look at quantum biology, we're getting evidence right now that everything is working in terms of just jump to the answer. That's what plants are doing when they photosynthesize. They just go straight to what the answer is. They take the shortcut on how to take energy from each photon of sunlight. And so they're much more efficient than anything humans have come up with yet with our photovoltaic cells, because biology is already using quantum operations, quantum logic, and we can too. So it's not hard. We can do this. We're built to do it. All of nature works this way.
We've got a great group here, don't we, Shane? Because every Saturday night we come together and we're using Lynne's Power of 8 technique. She came on the show, gave us her blessing, and talked to us about doing a large group. We do earth healing, meditation, intentions, prayers. It's all the same thing. And we get together and we take turns picking topics. And in the chat, people can put in their personal requests for healings. We do those too. And then, we'll maybe tackle cleaning water or putting out fires in California or ending some war in Yemen. We'll be specific in a general healing and a kind of collective healing. That's the word. We do it every Saturday live. And then about, 8 to 1,000 people will do it afterwards in retro causality. They'll join us later, a week or two later, and feel like they're right there with the group,
Yes. Yeah, time doesn't really matter for these things. And so that's the reason I don't use that word timeline too much. There's several reasons I don't use it too much. I know people then they think they know what they're talking about, but because it doesn't really matter. And we can choose between all these possible realities. And like you said, you can absolutely join in with the past, and nothing is impossible. You can pretty much change any situation. Just like that flat tire on the car, anything at all can be historically altered. So
how did I go from new tires to old tires, though? That doesn't sound like a logical thing to want to do, but it must have changed something. Something else must have been entangled with it, right?
Did you get your money back?
No, because I was never charged. He went in the computer. You were never charged for 4 tires. I only charged you for 2. And I said, do you remember putting on 2 in May and 2 in August? And he went, yeah. I said, well, where's the bill in the computer for the 2 in August? He says it doesn't exist. It's not there, and neither are your tires.
That's a trip. So technically, your credit card bill was probably lower than you thought it was going to be, or whatever.
But I remember paying it because it was on my Tires Plus credit card. So it was there when I paid it, but when the tires disappeared, the bill disappeared. So does that mean I'm out of money right now that I paid on 2 new tires? I don't know. I don't know how that.
What I noticed. One thing I noticed about this whole process is inevitably we're all going to hit these kind of quandaries where you can drive yourself nuts wondering like, what is going on? This doesn't look good. And what I recommend is don't freak out, because even if it doesn't look good, that's just on one level. You don't know the bigger picture.
It could be good. It could have been a very good reason for it. Yeah,
that's right. So for me, it's just a matter of keeping the faith, even when things seem like really crazy. Like when I thought I've got a flat tire and I'm going to be late. And I was even thinking, how good can it get? Look at this. I just hold fast to it. How good can it get? Like, okay.
How good can it get?
Yeah.
That's good. I love that statement because I've watched all your videos. So it's in here. I've got it in my brain now.
Yeah.
And it is amazing because as we look at this Lynne McTaggart, just her research into this topic, you can really see a whole different perspective on how it's coming about or how it's happening. And it's like we join all of our intentions together and actually shift together.
Right.
So, I mean, you can see how it's unfolding you can actually see the magic behind the curtain, if you will, of how it's actually coming about. We're actually shifting stuff,
Yes.
And we've entangled ourselves together and we love each other in this group. It's a really, really tight community. There's a lot of love in here.
Yeah. And really one of the main reasons is that, we can all talk to each other and don't have to worry about being looked at like we're crazy. You know what I mean? That's like the best part of it. Because we see the things, but normally in our normal lives, the everyday people we come across with are just like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. That's kind of crazy.
What's great though is when you're, because this happened to me. I was home for one of these holiday dinners with my family, and I know my sister and my parents used to think, okay, she's a bit nuts, but she's been nuts for like 20 years. Seems like a safe nut, They're like that. But okay, so the dishwasher broke down, and we're about to do like it was supposed to be 3 loads of dishes because we had this huge holiday meal. Lots of people were there. This is the funny part. My sister looks at me and she says, "Can you do that thing you do?"
Like which? Like take your little nose and clean the dishes?
No, because the dishwasher made a horrible sound. It's like my flat tire, It goes crunch, and then there's this cloud of oily smoke that comes up as a bad sound. It stops working, and there's smoke, and it's like, oh no.
Did you do it? Could you on demand? That sounds a little like, oh God, I can't do it.
Yeah, oh my gosh, yes, it totally worked. Because here's what made it possible is she looks at me, and I'm just so surprised she's asking that. So it made me laugh instantly. I'm like, because I couldn't believe it coming from her, because I know she thinks I'm a bit nutty. So I'm like, oh, this is funny. So I'm laughing, and I said, this is good. We're laughing because now she's laughing, and I said, this is perfect. Because we're taking it really lightly. And I said, here's how it works. And I just described it. In my gut, I can feel like we need this dishwasher to work. We've got way too many dishes here. We could wash them by hand. We'll be here like for hours. So we need it to work. She agrees. And I said, and we're feeling kind of joyful right now, kind of blissed out. I'm just going to open this thing up. I'm going to open the door. I'm going to pretend like it's working perfectly because I need it to work perfectly. I'm giving it all this love energy. I'm just filling the dishwasher with love, this feeling like it's going to work. I shut it. And I said, now I'm going to push the on button. It's going to start. And I push it, and it starts.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. And there was still a bit of a whiff of that bad, greasy, broken smell in the room, but it was working.
2 key things: fake it till you make it, and love. You were sending love to the dishwasher.
Yes.
It's like love works all miracles on all things.
Yes, it does. Yes.
Wow.
And that's how good it can get too, And if you're spiritual, then when you say how good can it get, it's kind of like how God can it get. You're bringing in the highest level of love you can possibly imagine. Absolutely bring it.
And Lynn does that too in her Power of 8, because we're a Power of 8 group. That's how we started. We did a book review like a year ago, and then people went out and bought the book and then contacted Shane and said, okay, we're ready. Let's start our community Power of 8 group. And we power up together. I'm sure you've done Lynn's techniques with her in groups and stuff, right? And then we breathe through our heart like heart maths, right? Mm-hmm. And then we think of either being in a beautiful place or doing something we love. And now that we're feeling good and we got all those love vibes going, then we do the intention.
Yes. And that's
really
the
right same thing, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. In many ways, it's how you go about when you need a shift. It's how you do it then, pretty much, huh? And there's all sorts of ways that can help you do that. I guess meditations and things.
Yes.
And you go over that, and quantum jumping, I think, was the one that I first saw when I first came across your work after the Mandela effect or whatever. I'm like, she's been talking about this for a while. Is that where you get into? Do you get into techniques in that book, or both books, or
I do.
Shifters?
I've got techniques in both of those books. Also, the high energy money one, because money's pretty fun too. Well, amazing stuff can happen with that, and so I share techniques and examples and meditations in all those books. Yes. And
I like your story that you've probably shared so many times. You're like, oh God, she's going to bring up that story again. It's like a musician having to sing their one song for 20 years, right? Where you didn't have money for a tip and your daughters were with you.
Oh yeah.
And you had to manifest just a few dollars, and you did, right?
Yes. And I've had this experience a couple of times where I needed money from nowhere, and it always comes through, because when you need it, you get it. And when you feel that love, you need it, you feel that love, and you're just all lined up. It's that feeling. You can feel it. It's like, this is happening. So yes, it was an extraordinary experience, because I was with both of my young daughters, which helps, because when you're with little kids, they have open minds, and usually
magic. Yeah.
And so what happened is we went out to dinner at a Mexican restaurant, and the waitress had been really nice, and I paid the bill. I think I can't remember if it was cash or a credit card, but what I wanted to give a cash tip for the waitress, because cash is better. And so I looked inside my wallet, but I didn't have much to give. I needed several $1 bills, which weren't there. And I thought, well, the way this works, I know the way this works. You just shut your wallet and then you're going to look again, because my daughters at that point had seen things, appearing out of nowhere. They lose their shoes and then they're back, and, keys disappearing and then reappearing, that kind of thing. So they know how this works. Money's no different. So I just opened my wallet again. I said, should we look again? And they're like, yeah, look again. So open the wallet. There's another $1 bill. And that was it, just one. So I'm pulling them out $1 bill at a time. And I'd shut it again, and then it's open. Should we look again? Yes.
Oh, there's another one.
Yeah, it was like a magic trick, but it was.
It is like a magic trick,
That's so neat. Oh my gosh.
But I do that with things. If I lose them, I call them back to me. I say them by name, and I say, garnet earring, come back to me. Come back to me now. Come back to me here. Come on, come back to me. And then I can't worry about it or look for it, because then I can't find it. But if I just forget it and move on, it'll show up in a couple of days, like 2 or 3 days. It'll be in some really strange place.
Yes, usually in a really strange place.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll get a vision of the strange place, and I'll sort of see it in my imagination, like, really? It's going to show up there? And I'll go check before it shows up, and it's not there yet.
Not yet.
And then they just keep checking that weird place. Here it is.
I've had that happen. With an earring that meant something to me, that came from my husband who passed away. It was a gift to me, and I only lost one of them. I'm like, I am not recycling this earring. I am waiting for the other one to come back to me, and then I learned to call it back. And that one took a year, but I'm telling you, it came back in the strangest place. The dog passed, and I was going to get rid of the dog bed, recycle it, clean it up, and give it somewhere. And as I took it apart, there was my earring, and I thought, what is my earring doing in between the mattresses of an old dog bed? Like, how would I get my ear down there, And it took a whole year for that one to come back. But that's when I learned that calling it to you works. It really, really works.
Yes. Well, that's beautiful.
That is amazing.
Yeah, because it's part of this commanding matter. I'm learning that we're here to command matter, and that doesn't mean that you're God or that you're doing something sinful, because if you like, God put you here to be in charge of matter and learn how to be the master of matter. So it's okay to command matter. You're not doing anything against the supreme being or the source energy. You're only dealing with material atoms around you. And that's okay. That's the comfort level I've come to.
Yes. And I personally prefer to look at it that way, in a spiritual way, rather than magic, because I don't see any of this as a magical practice, which tends to, because magic has that problem of like King Midas just wishing for something selfish for himself. Like, I want everything I touch to turn to gold, and that turns into a complete nightmare. And that's such a good example of human pride just getting in the way, and and greed, and just all sorts of things, and we don't want that to happen. So what we want to do is stay in service to the highest level of good that's possible. And when we have our intentions that things keep being as good as they can be, and that we're learning, as you say, to command matter, if you want to put it that way, because our thoughts and feelings literally change the physical world. Mm-hmm. That's what we're really learning here, and we're seeing evidence of it with the Mandela effect. And we're starting to witness that we can do things together, like this power of 8. So these are extraordinary, exceptional times right now. And it means that no matter what the problems might seem to be, we're up for it. We can work together, and there won't be anything that's going to be too big for us to deal with.
I think that's a good point, too, that, with Eileen talking about this baggage that we sometimes carry around, that, we think we're doing something evil. I see that kind of stuff as only hindering the process. You know what I mean? Because if you've got these thoughts here, then you're not really in the zone. It seems like you have to get in the love zone, so to speak, to do this manifesting, or shifting, if you will. And if you've got these results, so if you've got this stuff hanging around and you just feel like it's bad, or you're doing something wrong, or displeasing someone, or against your religion, or whatever it is, it's only going to hurt the process.
Right.
And like Lynn says in The Power of 8, she had thousands and tens of thousands of people doing intention experiments. And the leaky bucket, or the mirror effect, was coming back on them. The more they intended goodness for others, the more good things happened to them. So she's got this whole get off of yourself and start intending for others for the best possible outcome for others and then see what your life is like. You know, it's like if you just intend for me, it's really hard to get the universe to work in your favor. And as soon as you start loving everybody and intending for everybody, the universe is like, hey, I'm going to get behind that and push it. You know, something happens, something changes it from difficult because it's only for you to really easy because it's the best for everybody.
And I love that because it fits what we were talking about, the philosophy earlier. When I mentioned the two philosophers, Nicholas Rescher, he's a living octogenarian philosopher, and he wrote that book, Axiogenesis, which is a lot, I know it's a bit heavy, and most people don't read philosophy books, but if people are into philosophy and they want to read a good one, that's a good one. And then, of course, Leibniz, who's no longer with us, but he did found calculus and Western science as we know it. And those two guys, I look to them as a philosophy because it's exactly what you're talking about. What they're saying is that we have evidence in a universe that exists that's based on what's good and what's best for all. And that's what's happening. That's what's real. And so when we align ourselves with the reality, of course, things are going to work out. And when you go against that, then you're like a fish swimming the wrong direction. You know, it's not going to work out so well.
It's hard.
And we know that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I often tell people that Jesus said that we'd do the things he did and greater. And, I'm listening to your story about opening up the purse, pulling out $1, closing it, and pulling out $1. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this reminds me of him feeding all those people when he kept reaching in the basket and pulling more and more fish out, and bread or whatever. And I'm like, wow, he was like the first. And then you think about the healing and all that. I'm like, man, that could have all been reality shifting on his part. He might have just, and it was all done out of love, healing, feeding people.
Yeah,
so all the ingredients were there.
Your dollars were not for you, Cynthia. You weren't going, guys, I want that ring, but I don't have the money. Come on, purse. You wanted to give those dollars to somebody else.
Yes.
So they were just there. Boom, you want them, they're there because you were giving them. Yeah.
Yes. It's real need. It's not want, it's need. It's like we need this. We need to honor the services that we've received for good work that was provided. Need to have it. Yeah.
And so Shane, you're saying Jesus is like the top reality shifter this world has ever seen.
It totally could be that way when I look at it now. I'm like, holy cow, man, he could have just totally figured out that whole thing back then. You heal somebody or shift them into a healed state, or shift the food into more and more to feed the people and
feed the people.
It all makes sense. And there was a few times when, you read the Bible and it said that he like slipped through the crowd and they couldn't get him. He just shifted right out of there, man. They didn't know, you know what I mean? He's like, I'm not here anymore.
You're saying he was a quantum jumper.
Yeah, for sure.
Totally.
Well, I guess it only took us 2000 to learn his lessons. Okay, that's not bad going. That's one notch on the precession of the equinox, right? Should we look at it that way? 1 second on the equinox.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming along pretty well, though, I think. Just the fact that we're getting it now and people are understanding it and feeling it. That's amazing. We're here at such a good, important time in history.
You are so kind because you come on little channels. Shane's is big. I've got 2,000 people. He's got like almost 15,000 people. But a lot of these speakers who write big books won't come on little channels. I know because I go after them and they're like, no, their publicity people won't put them on, But you show up everywhere. I've been listening to you mostly on your own channel, your books, and Brian McFarland's, our friend up in Canada, right?
Right. Well, to me, it's not how big the channel. It's more about because small things can change everything, And so what it looks like size is not really important. That's misleading. Jesus understood that too. If you're looking at a master reality shifter, he knew. It's not really about the crowds and the numbers. It's just you need to reach the right people, and I think you guys do that. And you've got it, like you said, you've got this team that are focusing on the right way to focus with all love. And that's so important.
Shane, he brought us together when there was a lot of fear on YouTube about the Mandela effect. And I'm like, oh God, I got to find, and then we find Shane's channel. We're like, oh, this feels good here. This feels safe. This feels like we can be ourselves. We can be positive. And on Friday night, Cynthia, he has a 3-hour love stream where everybody who follows his interviews during the week can call up and talk as long as they like. It's like open mic night. in metaphysics, in spirituality, in love. You know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a love stream.
That's another thing, though. It is a small group, but these, everyone gets it too. So it's a fertile crowd, if you will, for people that's ready to put this stuff into practice. We're all ready to start shifting reality. That's for sure.
We got amazing people. I mean, real, just top notch. We're here for a reason, and I think we found each other for a reason. I feel like we're all like related in some way, cosmic or soul way. Yeah.
I get that actually with Cynthia. That's so funny that you say that, because a lot of times I'll have a familiarity with people, and I had it with Cynthia when I first saw her. I'm like, why is she so familiar? I know her from somewhere,
I feel
get
that
with a lot of people.
too.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah,
That's weird. Probably a previous life or dream state or something.
I think you recognize when it's part of the same soul team. It's like, good. He's here.
That's cool.
He's holding
Playing
up
for the same team. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
That's
For
awesome.
the good of all. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, should we move into an intention? What topic do you think would be good for the?
I'll let Cynthia pick it, unless somebody said something in the chat. I don't know. Maybe, Cynthia, you're not used to doing meditations on people's suggestions.
That's fine. No, it's fine. Anything's fine. So I'm not looking at the chat. So if you guys could tell me,
I
what's
don't have a
coming
chat.
through
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there anything, Shane, or should Cynthia just go with her heart?
Let us know.
Yeah, I'd say go with your heart. Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. Oh, yeah, I'll just go with my heart and with grace and with the sense of what's best for all of us. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll do this as a meditation. If people want to do that, they can close their eyes and just bring your attention to your breathing, because this is what powers things up. And you can use your breathing to help release any kind of fears that might have come up. Just say hello to them and then let them go. We don't need any fear for right now. So whatever it is, you can just let go of it. Breathe it out. And it might show up as tension in your body. So as you're breathing it out, just release it, let it go. And then as you're breathing in, just breathe in this beautiful golden white light, sort of like halo light that you might imagine seeing on a halo. And let this come into your body and fill you with a vibration of love, with light, with peace, with joy and harmony. And just letting that air go down. And as you exhale, you can listen to the sound of your breathing if you want to, and just imagine that you can feel a sort of natural rhythm to your breath, very much like if you've ever heard the waves at the ocean, where the waves come in. That's your air coming in. And then when you breathe out, you can just feel your air going out, like the ocean wave going back out to the ocean again. Just paying attention to your breathing and slowing it down, just feeling it nice and slow and gentle. Finding your own natural rhythm. And bringing your attention again to whatever you might be feeling in your body. Any kind of tension, you can just let it go. Just relax even a little bit more. So any residual tension whatsoever, you can release that. Let that go too. As you're breathing in, imagine that you can feel a sense of being connected with a higher level of awareness. The part of you that's aware of everything you're choosing and everything you're doing, and is guiding and supporting and helping you now. That golden white light that you might be able to imagine that you're breathing in. Restoring every cell in your body, revitalizing you. And everyone and everything you're connected to. And then as you breathe out, just sharing this love and this light with everyone. Feeling like you can start shining a little brighter in that process. And the next time you're breathing in, feeling it's going a little bit farther out, that you can feel more and more connected to a higher level of self. that you're gaining a sense of confidence, a sense of inner strength, a sense of purpose and meaning and vitality. That you're aligning yourself with all of these qualities and more, all the good qualities that you need in your life right now. And as you exhale, letting go of everything you don't need, and also sharing this beautiful love and light with the world, with everyone you're connected with everyone you care about. Just getting a sense of, as you restore yourself and come into your highest level of light and vibration, you're able to share more and more with everyone you care about, everyone you're connected to, everyone and everything you love. You can invite yourself to feel how good this can get as you take your next breath in. Just only selecting the very highest levels of vibration and love, because this is what you'd like to share with the world. And as you exhale, just feeling more and more connected in a deep, loving way with everyone and everything in your life. Some you know, some you don't yet know, but they'll be there in the future for you. You can start feeling those connections coming through. And inviting an experience of finding out how good your life can get on every level. With your friends, with your family, with your work, with your health. Just breathing in this beautiful golden white light. And exhaling and feeling that you're increasingly aligned with the highest level of goodness you can possibly imagine, whatever that might be. That you're now sharing that every time you exhale with everyone you love. That they can feel that strength coming from some hidden source. They may not know where it comes from, but if they think of you, they'll feel love. And again, drawing on that strength of the highest level of love you can possibly imagine. Breathing it in, receiving that love, knowing it's real. This is the source of all reality. And exhaling and sharing it with everyone and everything. And intending that this will continue, that you'll continue to feel the benefit of this, with this question, this invitation to keep finding out how good it can get for yourself, for everyone and everything you love, everyone and everything you're connected to. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Or you can just keep blissing out.
That did feel good. Yeah, I could feel the love of the group, and it was very nice.
Yeah. So.
That's very cool. So yeah, it's that actually. I done a video a while back on like how it seems like sometimes when miracles occur, it's like you're not allowed to see them occur. You know, it's like either it'll be like a horrible car wreck and you won't be able to figure out how the heck that person got out of it alive, but you won't actually get to see the magic happen. So like there was one time I was playing catch with my son, and for some reason I'm always like wanting to make sure he catches the ball, you know, so I throw it and then something in the sky caught my attention. I looked up and then I looked back down and he had missed the ball, and he goes, I don't know what happened. The ball hit the top of my glove, was coming right at my face. I closed my eyes and it ends up behind me somehow. You know, it's like there was a reality shift or some kind of miracle that happened, but neither one of us was allowed to see it happen. I think about, you know, that it's kind of a scientific way of looking at it when you kind of go back, you know, the superposition idea, you know, that.
And the quantum Zeno effect too, you know, because like that quantum, like if anybody's eyes were open, if you were looking, then you'd lock it into that reality where it's going right at his face.
Right.
So that I didn't get into the EPR steering part of it. That's another piece of this. I mentioned entanglement, quantum EPR steering, but you absolutely can affect things. And that's
Well, we
part of
have
that power
time
of eight.
if you're not in a hurry, because I would love to hear more about
Yeah,
that.
me too. I've never heard of the EPR steering. That sounds really interesting.
Is it a whole nest egg, or is it?
Yeah, kind of. It's like turtles all the way down. It's the observer of the observer of the observer, and the way that layer. So when you've got your groups of 8, you can become a higher level observer of a given system. And so even if it seems like it's fixating in a direction you don't want it to go, when you're able to step back, this is the key. Again, I'm going to go back to Leibniz, because he was the one that was talking about this whole idea that basically, consciousness requires that first observer, where you've got that first level, the first order perception of X. But then when you've got a second level perception it's basically reflective, that's where consciousness resides, which is why when you meditate, if you're able to observe, okay, these thoughts and these feelings, that I think of that as me, but if I can be the observer of my thoughts and feelings, that's where the power of the meditation comes in. Prayer is very similar. It's recognizing you can be outside of yourself. You can recognize that there's something observing the observer, if you will. And that's what you're playing with EPR steering is, EPR is that Einstein, Poldansky, Rosen observation. And so it's, Einstein, everyone knows who that is, but those guys, EPR, the Einstein, Poldansky, and Rosen, those guys came together with the idea that, that you can make these observations and so forth. So what we're talking about now is recognizing that if you've got a quantum system, and like in the case of your son with the ball, the reason you can't look at a miracle is because if you look, you're going to be locking it into a system. And what was happening was what you didn't want to observe. So you can't be looking at that. And then the miracle occurred because the ball was coming right at his face, but that didn't happen. So you could bring in EPR steering if you need to for a situation, not that one maybe, but like with the dog with the clouded cataract situation. That's a good example, because one person's observing the cataracts that are happening, and another person comes along, and you're basically able to join together. That's more entanglement. I'm trying to think of a good example of EPR steering. EPR steering would be, I think some examples of it are happening with Mandela effect right now. We talked about the thinker and the head positions, the hand positions. So it's a little bit strange, but the steering part comes in where the group of observers, which might be folks on the internet, maybe in a group like yours or somewhere else, are observing that that's happening, and they're able to witness firsthand that there's going to be a change. And you could do it with your power of 8 groups too. You could observe one given situation, and then by observing the observation, switch something back. So you can have sort of a flip-flop effect, and you can witness something good even when it seems to be locked in a different state of being. I don't know how to make it simple.
Because Shane kind of did that, because we all knew about this change to this change, but then Shane showed us this change, which you would have to be an artist or really looking to notice that, because I never noticed that. You brought that into our group.
Isn't that weird? Same thing with the Mona Lisa. Now she's got like a little bump right here next to her nose, and she's changed. Now she went from a smile to a hairnet to like a bump here, and each time I would Photoshop the image back to the original, and I kept having to change it, but each time my Photoshopped version would get the new addition to it. So it's just really weird, really strange the way it works to watch it happen that way. So what you're saying though is I can observe. So like with the dog instance, I can observe myself, notice the dog's eyes, the cataracts go away or something. And I can kind of, by going back a level, I can, instead of focusing on the exact thing I want to change, I can focus on me observing the thing change. Is that kind of the idea of this?
Yeah, it's kind of, prayer works this way too. Like if you believe, you can hand it to God, let God handle the heavy lifting, and I'm just going to do my part. So I give it to God, and then you're going to get a lot of miracles that way, because you're just giving it to God. Like, okay, God's got this. And that's like the ultimate observer, So you really got powerful miracles there. And with groups of 8, you can get mini miracles, or groups of families where you're like, okay, we need something to happen. But if you bring in the highest level observer, you can really get off the charts amazing miracles. And
do you bring in the highest level observer by always handing it over to them?
When I ask how good can it get, that's what I'm doing. I'm basically saying, let your imagination run wild. What's the ultimate good,
Because I've noticed in manifestation studies, primarily through Lynne, I did her healing group last year for Power of 8, and I read her book since 2004, The Field, The Intention Experiment. And I've been doing her intention experiments since 2004, I think, with the bay leaf and Sri Lanka and the lake in Japan. So what I've noticed is that, and Abraham Hicks talks about it, Jerry and Esther Hicks, a lot of people in manifestation law of attraction say, don't worry it, let it go. Like request it or command it or ask for it, and then give it to the highest power and let it go. Don't think about how it's going to come to you, when it's going to come to you, worry if it's going to come to you, because the universe will find the quickest way to get it to you, which might not be the way you thought you were going to receive it, right? So it's a little more creative to open it up, to give it to God and say, okay,
every time when you worry, you're doing that quantum Zeno effect. You're check, your OCD locking it, you're quantum locking it into a state. And so that's a problem. You don't want to be doing
thought of that, because we don't know about the quantum Zeno effect, that you're looking at it and looking at it and looking at it every time you worry. So then it doesn't come about because you've locked it through observing it too much, fixing it.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Yeah, so you've really tied together some big mysteries that I've had, whether it's like, the way people that are close to something don't seem to see it happen sometimes if they're too close to it. They've just been locked into that reality, moving backwards in time to always, remember things the way they are, even though they see all the other Mandela effects. I mean, that was huge for me, a huge puzzle, because I knew it was a big piece of the puzzle, but I just couldn't figure out what it was, you know what I mean? And the whole other thing with just the possibilities, with not looking, because I see the whole timeline thing as being hampering, although it's helpful to look at it linearly, it's kind of harmful because it kind of drives you into this linear way of thinking about something that's anything but linear. You know what I'm saying? So
it gets you stuck on the new timeline.
Yeah,
and now you've lost that ability to move and shift again.
But it's hard to talk about it without saying timeline sometimes, What
would you recommend, Cynthia? Dimension, string? It's like a holographic onion, and you can move through the different layers of the onion, but they're not really layers because they're not really there, because it's holographic. So how would you describe these quantum jumps we're making with the Mandela effect? They're not timeline shifts.
Yeah, it's consciousness shifting. So it's like we are consciousness. So your identity is really important. And, knowing like you are pure consciousness and you're in a physical body, but you can actually change your physical body too, absolutely. So if it's sick, you can change that. It can be better. You can lose weight. You can, lots of good things can happen when you recognize you are consciousness. And you start resonating at that higher level of eternal, infinite existence that you truly are. The more you recognize that, the more you realize that, the easier it is to make all these quantum jumps. And then those are possibilities. It's like possible realities. Yeah. And you can move amongst any of them just through thought, through intention, through need, and through love. It's just that lining all those parts of ourselves are there for a reason. Our heart is right in the center, and that's to bring our attention to our heart and make sure that we keep it open. But we also need to keep our crown chakra open to the infinite goodness that exists, and not let ourselves get consumed with fear, because it's too easy to go down a downward spiral if we do that. So.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think that's a great place to bring it to a close. We'd love to have you back again.
Yeah.
This is a wonderful discussion. We could go like a whole nother 2 hours.
We could go for 5 hours, I bet.
We could. It's such an endless topic. It's interesting, and everybody's loving it. So we got 102 people watching, so everybody's loving it.
Well, thank you so much. I've had such a good time and such a pleasure that you're doing what you're doing. So thank you both for.
Thank you, and you'll come back. You will come back. Can we have
I
you
would
back?
love to. Of course.
Put her on the spotlight.
Yeah.
Will you marry me in front of the whole
proof
stadium?
until Mandela effect, it's gone.
Well, for those coming in late or you weren't here in the beginning, I do have Cynthia's links all down below, and there's the book, Quantum Jumps. And so definitely want to connect with her.
Awesome book.
Her own YouTube
awesome.
channel.
Look at this. In my book, I have written a million things, and I never knew I'd get to talk to you to ask you about them. I just kept writing in my book. It's a wonderful workbook, everybody who loves intending and manifesting and praying and meditating. It's all in there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Cynthia, for coming on so much.
It's a pleasure.
And thank you, Eileen.
Thank you.
For making it all happen. Lots of love and light
Lots
to
of love,
everybody in the chat.
everybody. Love you guys.
And we'll see you on the next one. If you'd like to support the work I do, go to paypal.me/UOTF. Thanks.